أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين. We always begin seeking refuge and protection from the cursed devil and all of those who he influences. And we begin in the name of Allah, the compassionate, the merciful, seeking all of the beauty of his many various names and qualities that we are supposed to be learning from and embodying in our character. So we praise him in abundant praise that he should be praised in our daily lives through our word and deed. And we ask him to send his peace and blessings and mercy upon his final messenger, Muhammad. So inshallah, I will go ahead and share this screen for you, inshallah. Bismillah. So we're talking about the purpose of life as it is rooted in the soul. And when we talk about the purpose of life, we are talking about, let's see here. How do I change this? Okay, now we've got it. The first thing we have to understand is what is the human being? And Revelation has blessed us with an understanding of what is the human being. So we'll put this right here. This is an ayah from the Quran right here. It says, he is the one who created a human being from water and then made his relations through progeny and marriage, right? So this is Surah Al-Furqan. So when you see 25, that means that is the number of the surah. And when you see here 54, that means that is the number of the ayah. So the 54th ayah of Surah Furqan, chapter number 25, he is the one that created a human being from water and then made his relations through progeny and marriage. What it means is the physical being of every human being started with water. And that water is mixed with the dirt of the earth, as we'll get into. And then he will create through the male and the female progeny and marriage. So we are understanding from this ayah that all human beings are created from this earth, from the water of this earth, and that we are created as related beings through two main means. We are physically related, and we have special rights and relationship through marriage, husband and wife, and then through progeny, children, grandchildren, parents, grandparents, and so forth. So that's the first ayah about the human being in and of itself. Then the next ayah says, he has created you from clay, then from a zygote, then from an embryo, then he brings you out as a baby. Then you will reach your responsible maturity, and then you will grow old. So now he's talking about our physical being here, that originally the physical form of human beings comes from water mixed with dirt. And then he has caused that to become a human being, created that human being's wife, as we said from the last verse, Adam and Eve, and then these two living beings then will come together and we will have a zygote, which is basically nutfa. Nutfa in Arabic is referring to the mixture of two fluids, and so we know that's the egg and the sperm. Then from an embryo, that zygote grows into like a little small form of flesh. Then he brings you out as a baby. And so what he means to say is that human beings are created from the earth through processes that he has created, and that we will come out existing as a human being in a very miraculous way. So he's wanting to emphasize what we've all known, that those of us who have seen the babies grow in the womb and as it comes into the world, it's absolutely, unquestionably a faith enforcing miracle. And that's what he's talking about here. Then you will reach your responsible maturity. ثُمَّ تَبْلُغُوا أَشُدَّكُمْ. Meaning what? You will grow into a being that will know and understand your purpose in life, and then you will grow old. And so then your time will come to an end and you will get weaker and you will leave this earth. So the third verse here, surely we have created them from sticky clay. And so this is basically that the mud of the earth, he made it in a way and fashioned it so it would stay together, that it has an intrinsic purpose. He calls it molded clay in Surah Al-Hijr, and in Surah Ar-Rahman, he refers to it clay like a potter, meaning something that was shaped and given its size and its perfect order. As we know that when we see the clay and it's all, just like mud, but then when someone who is making pottery and they're very good at it, then you see them after it circles around and they form it up and shape it in that way, then it becomes this beautiful pot, and it dries out and it fulfills the purpose for which it was created. And usually with a pot, something is put into it, which is what's going to lead us into the next part of our discussion. So the two elements of the human being. Here he says, once I made him and I blew my spirit into him. So this is, in Surah Hijr again, he's talking about that I created him and made the human being, and then فَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي, I blew into him my spirit. Okay, so here, as you see, he uses the word my, okay, meaning what? That the spirit is of his possession. It's not, we don't own ourselves. We are not individuals. We are his property, and we are a special blessing that comes from him. Our consciousness is this special gift that you can never explain, no matter how hard you try. And so then in the verse, in a different surah number 32 here, verse number 9, he says, mirruhi, this is now his spirit, meaning it's been put in the body, and now that person is responsible for this soul that he has put in there. So the human being is distinguished from all other creations with four fundamental qualities. Number one, an innate inclination to the oneness of God and our need of him. So throughout history, all cultures of the earth, all peoples of the earth have time and time again believed in God, the creator. They have a word for the supreme being, and they have prayed to that being. Now, we know many cultures of the earth have gone astray and begun to worship creations of the creator and have gone astray in that. So even you will find atheists that when they think they're going to die or something really bad happens, what do? They start to pray all of a sudden. And they're pulling out what you call Pascal's wager. Well, if he is there, then I should call out to him. But you were saying before this very dangerous moment came upon you that, I think it's absurd to believe in a God or a invisible force or being that I can't see or touch, hear or smell or taste and all of that. They used to say that was absurd. But now when the time comes and they're in the ocean, as the Quran says, and they are worried about death, now they say, oh God, if you're there, help me. Well, if that's absurd, then you wouldn't say it. But that is built in, innate. Innate means you're born with it. It's a natural inclination. Okay, and the second thing here is the realization of conscious rational thought. The human being, like no other creation on earth, has this natural realization of our own existence, our consciousness, and the rational thought that this makes sense and that does not make sense. And it takes lots of conditioning to make us to accept things that are against something that's rational, something that is irrational. Number three, we were all created with the freedom to choose between good and bad and the ability to do what he or she wants as a person. So this, the Sheikh here is saying that all people have the freedom to choose between what they see as good and bad or right and wrong, and they have the ability to act upon that and do what they do. And obviously they will be accountable. And that's number four, a recognition of responsibility for one's actions. So here what he's saying is, even the atheists, again, all agree that we need a law. We need laws. People should be responsible. It is a fundamental trait of human beings that people should be accountable for the decisions they make, and that if they do good things and valuable things, people praise them. And when they do harmful or corrupt things, people punish them, and that we believe in institutionalized punishment. So all human beings have always agreed on this thing. You do not find this in the animal kingdom or anywhere else that we know of in creation. So here, understanding these four is where we get how the soul and the body are mixed and how they are meant to work together. That is the purpose for which we were created. And that moves us to the next point here. The purpose for creating humanity. He created death and life to test which of you is best in work. So this is obviously the famous Surah Al-Mulk, وَهُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ. So somebody might ask, why does he say create death before life? Because actually he is the only being, al-awwal wal-akhir, that is eternal and has absolute existence. And so his reality is permanent. Everything else needs to be created from non-existence. So we all at the beginning of our existence, we're coming out of non-existence, death. And so death is the standard. And that is something that everyone came out of. And then life we will have in this world, and then we will die again, and then we will be given life again, and we will be responsible in that work. That's why he says, so many of the scholars, they said, death here is just simply representing the finite world of this life that we're living in. Meaning what? That we are here in this world, sooner than later, we're going to die. And then we will be given life on the day of judgment, and then after that, we will have life after that. The question is, based upon what he says at the end here, which of us was best in work? And that's the phrase that he used. In Arabic, you could say deed or action or business or whatever, but he says work, meaning that spirituality and being a servant of God is something that we work at. It's something that our daily life should feel like we are charged with this responsibility towards a spiritual truth, towards a divine legislation and guidance that we live in the world, how we live based upon. And so when we live that way, then when life comes to us, it is the permanent comfort of life that has no death after it. And so that's why many of the scholars said death and life come in that order. So the next verse here is at the beginning of Surah Al-Insan, or also known by the Prophet ﷺ as Surah Al-Dahr. So truly we created the human being from mixed fluids in order to test them. Then we gave them the faculties of hearing and sight. Surely we guided them to the right path, and they will either be grateful or ungrateful. So here, this ayah is fundamentally explaining who we are and what we're about. We are created from mixed fluids, meaning what? From our mother and our father. And amazingly enough, that our scholars interpreted from this long before the science of genetics existed. So you can read in tafsirs about this ayah long ago, where they said that we are having a soul, a spiritual truth that Allah creates us with. But the mother and the father will come together, and there will be a mixture of their qualities and traits that the human being will have, and they're tested. So, and then they even considered that it's not just a matter of physical traits. They said that it is also character issues. They said that this, so amshaj, that they're saying that is describing the human being rather than necessarily nutfa. And so they're saying that the human being was created of a mixture. And so it's the mixture of mom and dad. The fluids here represent mom and dad as a representative reality. And so we are inheriting, according to classic Islamic scholarship of this ayah, we are inheriting from mom and dad physical traits that are a mixture, and many character traits and inclinations, whether it be hardworking or lazy, or whether it be anger problems or easygoing, whatever, no problem. People are inheriting things, and we are tested with this. So then he says, then we gave them the faculties of hearing and sight. Meaning what? The test that we have, if we use our hearing and sight right, we will be supported in our test. Meaning, what should we use our hearing for? To listen to a good word. الَّذِينَ يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقَوْلَ فَيَتَّبِعُونَ أَحْسَنَهُ. That The believers are those who hear a good word and they follow it to the best of their ability, or they follow any word and they follow the best of it. You know, um, sometimes, I'm concerned when my children, it seems like they listen to some sort of program on TV and there was many good things in there, but then they take out of it the one bad thing and that's what they talk about afterwards. And it's like, hold on, that's not why we were given hearing. That's not what, so that's that curious shaitan influenced reality that we will talk about later today. And so our hearing inside, so we should be spending time listening to knowledge and benefit and things that help us out. And we are able to see things, and we see, is that good that's being done or is that evil? Is this person saying something nice about something, or are they doing something bad? And so sometimes, we have to reflect upon the blessing of hearing and sight and realizing it is the means to the soul from the body, you see. So we are going into our ears and our eyes. What we see and hear is going into our heart at the end of the day, and that's affecting who we are. So when we see evil and then we feel in our heart, we should avoid it, because our heart is alive and well and pure, as we're doing this whole series about. Then we can engage it. But if we don't have a pure heart and we're not concerned with a pure heart, if we're not even concerned with being a soul in the first place, then we're watching and listening to things, whether it be music or television or people's situations or whatever, and then we just let our guard down, then that will just pile on top of itself the darkness of the heart and the impurity of the heart. So then he says, surely we guided them to the right path, and they will be either grateful or ungrateful. Them here is referring to all human beings. So one time I asked one of my teachers about this ayah, because basically the other ayahs that say he guides whom he wills, and then it seems to be saying he misguides whom he wills. يَهْدِي مَن يَشَاءُ وَيُضِلُّ مَن يَشَاءُ. So these things are very problematic when you say, okay, يُضِلُّ مَن يَشَاءُ, to many people. He's misguiding. So here, this ayah is saying he guides everyone. Everybody has been guided. What it means here is that he created us, as we'll talk about deeper later. Every human being has a basic level of guidance that they're born with. They are innately, inherently connected with the spiritual truth that they are. And they can choose to suppress it, meaning kafara. Kufra is to conceal or suppress. That's what it means. That's why when you've done sins, they call it kathara, that you are suppressing that sin. It's going away. It's being moved away. So kufr is to suppress or remove or try to get rid of the inborn truth of your soul as it relates to your heart and this knowledge you have deep down in you about it, right? So all human beings are given guidance. And so those who choose misguidance, if you go through all the ayahs of who's misguided, then you will see it's because they chose it. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, right? It says those who disbelieve, سَوَاءٌ عَلَيْهِمْ أَأَنذَرْتُهُمْ أَمْ لَمْ تُنذِرْهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ, right? So it doesn't matter whether you warn them or guide them or not, they're not going to believe because they have chosen disbelief. And for that reason, خَتَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ, he has put a seal on their hearts. He says about the Israelites, he says, فَلَمَّا زَاغُوا أَزَاغَ اللَّهُ قُلُوبَهُم. In the Quran in Surah As-Saf, he says, and when they deviated, then God deviated their hearts as a response to that. Meaning what? Meaning he facilitated them. That's like Surah Al-Layl. So it says, وَأَمَّا مَنْ أَعْطَى وَاتَّقَى وَصَدَّقَ بِالْحُسْنَى. As for the one that was giving and generous, and they were preparing for the goodness of the hereafter, then the straight path will be made easy for them because of what they have chosen to do. وَأَمَّا مَنْ بَخِلَ وَاسْتَغْنَى وَكَذَّبَ بِالْحُسْنَى فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْعُسْرَى. That as for the one who has turned away from this, they've become selfish and they are not interested in a hereafter or God, then that path to hell, that path will be made easy for them as a result of what they've done. وَيَهْدِي إِلَيْهِ مَنْ أَنَابَ. Who does he guide and why? He guides to himself those who turn to him. There's many times in the Quran like that. وَمَن يُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ يَهْدِي قَلْبَهُ. Whoever seeks to believe in him, then he will guide their heart. This is in Surah Al-Taghabun. So there is a reason why he's doing that. But the fundamental reality of all born human beings, this verse, chapter 76, Surah Al-Insan, verse number 3 here, is saying that people are all born with guidance. So this idea of trying to use things that are talking about God's knowledge and not his action as a guide. People say, well, he created those for the hellfire and he created those for the heaven. So then therefore that's what they were created for. No. What he's saying is he created people with freedom of choice. Some people will choose the hellfire and some people will not. That's what that hadith means. It could never mean that he created someone to torture them. That is an unjust God that I don't think anybody here wants to worship. And so then here he talked about the fundamental reality. Surah Al-Dhariyat, chapter 51, verse 56. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I have only created jinn and humanity to serve me. To serve me. So, ibadah, ya'bud, abid, it could mean to serve and it could mean to worship. But those two concepts in spirituality are one and the same. So, if you are worshiping Allah, he doesn't need anything from you. Whoever thought that he needs my worship, then that person has totally misread the Quran or has not been reading the Quran at all. What it is I know that I am a creation of his and that he has created me for a purpose. And so I'm going to do that once I find out what it is. And so we're born with a basic knowledge. We're all born feeling awkward about attacking someone who is not attacking us, right? We all are born feeling awkward about someone taking something from somebody else. I mean, they have a test to check. I mean, even people who lie all the time, if you check their pulse, you will find that their heart is moving in a different way when they lie. It's naturally, we know that's wrong, but we need revelation to give us full clarity. Then when we find revelation and we embrace the prophethood, then we can see an example with a whole manual of how to serve the divine truth that created us. And so that's why we were created. That is our whole purpose. So when some people say, I've only created jinn and humanity to worship me, because of this watered down understanding of worship, I've asked many, many young people. I mean, I've asked some adults. The idea of worship for most people, the idea is praying, fasting, reading Quran, making dhikr, that's worship. Other than that is my regular life. That's not worship. But everything we're doing right now, everybody listening to this is worshiping. If you call up your mother or take care of her or do something for her, that's worship. If you go do the best job you can for the sake of Allah when you go to work to do your work, or now that when you do it at home to the best of your ability, that's worship. Worship is defined in the Quran and in the Prophet ﷺ's life as everything you do in your life to serve God. That's what it is. So when you're on this spiritually pure, the purification of the soul is in this constant state, as we said, seeking this excellence of spiritual purpose, where we're going around doing what we do, trying to serve God. Not for ourselves or because of some cultural thing or what somebody else wants from us or what we think we're going to get out of somebody. So if we do that, then that's what they'll do for me, and so forth. So now that brings us to this fundamental reality of human beings. Remember when your Lord said to the angels, I'm placing on the earth a caliph, a deputy, a viceroy. This is who human beings are, all of them. By the way, this in the Quran and every single place in the Quran, it refers to khilafah as for all human beings, you see? And so what this means is there's a type of human being, as we'll go in the next slide, that is worthy of khilafah. And so what is this khilafah? I talked to some of my Christian and Jewish friends about this, and they're all impressed. Everyone that I've had a deep conversation or even gave just a few sentence explanation of the concept of a caliphate and a caliph, they like it. They think it sounds really good, and they're happy to join. So we cannot allow some crazy, misguided people to hijack our fundamental terms of human spiritual truth as it was bestowed upon us by Allah himself, because some people did some bad things and called themselves a caliphate. Now we'll never use that word. Some people did something and said that's jihad, so now we'll act like that's a bad word. This is really, really dangerous, because these are revealed truths that talk about fundamental spiritual realities. So the more we allow people to remove these spiritual realities and then define them in a completely distorted way, then we will lose our religion, because we're allowing them to distort our identity and we're empowering them in such. So the concept of a caliphate is a human being is created by God to do his work, to use his or her intellectual conscious capacity, those four things we mentioned, and the feeling of responsibility, and this spiritual truth of divine guidance, and to be using our mind and our moral truth that we have learned through revelation to make the world a better place, to extend justice, wisdom, compassion, understanding, kindness, cohesiveness, tolerance. All of these are a healthy world, and all of these will build the goodness of the world. Whatever people choose to believe is a side issue here. When we shine the light and we do what we're supposed to do, feeling a responsibility and a blessing and honor, as we'll talk about in the next slide, that we are we are all responsible deputies of God on this earth, promoting and guiding people to the truth of their purpose. And that isn't by enforcing upon them how you must believe and how you must live, but it's by living and promoting what we know in and of ourselves. And then people will become naturally curious. That moves us to the special gifts in our purpose. So he says, وَصَوَّرَكُمْ فَأَحْسَنَ صُوَرَكُمْ, right? He shaped you in the best way possible for your purpose. What this means is the way the human being was created, the form that we've been given, that is the best form. Fi ahsani taqweem, as we all know from Surah At-Teen. And so what this means is, obviously, when you think about the intellect and you think about speech and writing and reading, this is the intellect. I mean, the Darwinists and the evolutionists, they don't see how it looks very weird. Because here we are supposedly now, according to them, and God knows best, because we don't have anything that would negate that. We've been here billions of years on this earth, okay? So the only being on earth that has intellectual conscious capacity of moral recognition and responsibility is the human being. There is no amazing giraffes or lizards or other forms of monkeys or other beings that were able to talk and imagine if a giraffe could talk, so he's intellectual. How's he gonna write that down? How's he gonna write it down? Okay, so that we were created in the perfect purpose for what we were created for. In the next verse, he says, this is Surah Al-Isra, surely we have honored the children of Adam and carried them through the land and the sea. We have provided them with the good things and preferred them heavily over much of our creation. So here in this verse, what our scholars have took from this throughout our history is that all human beings are honored and blessed by God, and they should be treated with dignity, right? So this idea of those are kuffar, or those are sinners, or whatever have you, and so they're evil and filthy and no good, that is not our business to make that judgment about them. If they are doing wrong, we will advise them to do right. We'll avoid them if it doesn't make sense to advise. Fine. But we're not here to cast judgments or decide someone's intrinsic spiritual reality or to condemn them in some sort of way outside of the natural law and the law of human relationships as we live in a society. So we respect all of people's humanity. And we see that everything we have, everything we've done as we've spread across the world is a blessing from him. And he has provided us with all these things. So the fact that we have these computers, the fact that those of us that are here are healthy and in good shape, the fact that we have families, the fact that we have food and clothing, he has provided, it's all came from him. So our being honored by him should naturally cause us to live a state of gratitude, realizing that our honor is through him and by him. So this is a thana al-hasan. It is through him that praise worthiness is given. And so here, when we look at the angels, when they were told to prostrate to Adam out of respect for the special nature of human goodness, when we contrast that with the angels, the scholars have said that human beings that are living a life of piety and righteousness are far superior to angels. So we tend to think in terms of characters and powers and things like that. There is the creative will to do good, sincere creative will to do your best at creating good, beneficial outcomes in yourself and the world around you. That is the pinnacle of all existence. That is what all of his Asma'ul al-Husna are about. So when we're living that, we are the best of all creation. When we live that reality, then we are the most worthy of praise. And that's why he told the angels to bow down in respect to us, that they prostrated in respect to human beings as a category, as a being. We'll talk about it where we're not worthy of that shortly, but in general, the believer is the best. Now, you have to see it that if you are a believer and you are following revelation and you feel guilty when you sin and you try to make amends seeking his forgiveness, if you need to get the forgiveness of human beings, you immediately run to that, then you know that's all what? A blessing from him. That you didn't know to do any of that unless you tapped into the truth of who you are as a soul. And that revelation came to, confirm it to you. And so you sought that by his blessing. He allowed that. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There is no might or power or ability without him. So we are blessed and honored and thanking him for having guided us. That's why the Prophet in that famous prayer, Allahumma hdina fiman hadait. Guide us among those who you have guided. We want to be blessed and grateful for that. So angels are just doing what they're told. Angels do not have any sort of one iota of creative good. Angels are like God's, soldiers. They just are created for a purpose. They do whatever he tells them. They don't think on their own. It's just like, the ants and the bees. Everybody has a job to do in creation. And so that's angels are one of those. There are special angels with special responsibilities that are very important. And we, honor them for that. But at the end of the day, they were given that by him and they don't have any choice. And they never decided, oh, well, now I'm going to be an angel Gabriel today. And so then I will do X, Y, and Z as this is my idea about how I will respond to God. No, he does exactly what he's told as he was told to do it. But he has a special place in that revelation came from him, which is a blessing from Allah. So that is, we are praising him for that. So Satan's refusal to, it just basically helps us to see his role and his, primary methods of preventing the human being from our God-given potential. So you can get into the philosophy or the mind-bending reality of it. Well, if God knew that the devil would, and then therefore, so does that mean that he intended for? Leave all of that. The reality is you are a blessing in his creation. The reality is you can feel and see his truth around, and the miraculous prophets came and they did the miracles and they left the message that when you read it, you know that that's what you're about. Even though it's calling you to give out of your own and to disassociate yourself from yourself, your mind and your body, to become one in purpose with the divine truth that created you. Mir ruhi, as he said, from my soul, not as his own soul, but as a soul that he created specifically for a purpose that he created it. So Satan, in fact, chose to not bow down and prostrate when he was told. Now, of course, God knew he was going to do that. And at the end of the day, if we're going to appreciate good and bad and know the difference and appreciate happiness versus sadness, or comfort and good feelings versus pain and discomfort, we would have to know one to know the other. So in his wisdom, it has to be that there is evil for there to be good. Otherwise, it would not be called good. It would be just the way things are. And there would not be an opposite to distinguish and define it. So our God-given potential is in looking at his enemy attack and avoiding it and rebuking it and protecting ourselves from it. So in his arrogance and in his jealousy, he sought to mislead us from our purpose for which we were created. And he says that. He says, I will surround them with my way. I will come from the right, from the left, from in front, from behind. I will make this world and the desires of the world and the materialism very desirable to them, and I will mislead them. So that's what Satan has promised, because he was very jealous. He wanted to be the one, but that self-absorbed nature is not worthy of being God's responsible authority on the earth. And so that's where we see why he did not have anyone bow down to him, and his progeny will have the responsibility and decision to choose to leave such a life. So impurity, true impurity, is about distancing ourselves from God. So the word shatana in Arabic is a shatanat al-ardu. It means that land is very far, right? So the word shatana, from the word shaitan, it means to be very distanced, something that's very far away. And so God is called a shaitan al-rajim, meaning the one. The rajam in Arab, pure Arabic, it means to throw rocks at somebody, right? But what it meant is to be cast out of the town or to be, punished with death through such a terrible means. They call that rajam. So shaitan al-rajim, he is the distanced being that is told to stay outcast and is cursed to not come back. To what? To the mercy of God. And why? Because he has chosen that. Going back to who he guides and who he doesn't guide and why. And that is a choice that he made. As we know it, he's still on that choice. And that's his decision. And so this title was given to all who would take this path. So shaitan is not like a being. We have this Quranic word iblis and the different, this is Lucifer and Beelzebub. They have the names for the entity, the jinn, who made that decision. But what he did was he founded sunnah. He founded a foundation for a path. What is that path? Rebellion, selfishness, arrogance, greed, envy. All of those things is he founded this divergence from Islam, this divergence from the purity of being close to God and doing his will and knowing his will, which is what happens when you're close to someone. You're affected by them, that you think and you act and you talk in a way that is because you're close to that person a lot. So when you're close to God, you will think and act and talk in a way that reflects your knowledge of him and his will. So this is why Satan is not worthy of being a deputy, because he is a rebellious being. So here in Surah Al-Mu'minun, we see, do you think we have created you without purpose and that you will not be returned to us, right? So what it means is, do human beings think that they were created just, for no reason? There's no, just God created things and then that's just, do whatever you want to do. No, what he's saying is, if you're close to him, you will know purpose and it will make sense. And that is what through a pure heart, you have revelation, and that is feeding your heart and that natural fitra inclination, that innate connection you have. And so you stay close with him throughout life. How do you do that? By purifying the soul. Right? The more you attend to the body, the further away you will be. And that's exactly how shaitan, how the devil, Iblis, told God he would do it. And that's how he started with Adam. I mean, he said, look, it's not just an apple here we're talking about. It is that you could be like kings, like immortal beings, like angels who have wealth that never ends. That's how he came to them. This materialistic desire for things. So this is where we see our enemy and what that is all about. So what is filth at the end of the day? So there's filth to the soul just as there is filth for the body. And so in the famous verse of Surah At-Tawbah here, إِنَّمَا الْمُشْرِكُونَ نَجَسٌ, right? That the polytheists are filthy. So the polytheists are filthy for many reasons. And here he's not talking about every polytheist because they don't believe in the oneness of God, but the polytheists that he was talking about was those Quraysh, and it was obviously partly because they're worshiping idols, which makes no sense. It is a distancing from God. And that's what they said. لِيُقَرِّبُنَا إِلَى اللَّهِ زُلْفَى. He talked about in Surah Zumar at the very beginning, the polytheists described why did they worship these idols. They said, they will bring us closer to God. If we worship and spend our time worshiping these statues, then we'll get closer. Why? Because they saw themselves far from him, right? وَهُوَ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْكُمْ مِنْ حَبَلِ الْوَرِيدِ. He is closer to us than our jugular vein. And obviously the reason he told us that is because that's our life force. The connection between the mind and the heart is this blood vein that is very strong and always needing to be very well connected. So this is, this filth, this impurity is in distancing ourselves. What is filth and impurity? The more you're attached to this earth, to this dirt of this earth. When you think about dirt, think of filth, right? So God was able to turn that in purity when he made us. So we should keep that purity through him, through the spirit that caused. It was the soul that caused mud to become the body that we all feel is our identity. And so this body with life and this beauty that comes from every human being is because the soul was put into clay, what we see as dirty and filthy. So the more you're closer to this earth, which is called dunya, which means close, then the further you would be from him, and the more that dirt of this earth will make you impure. So that's why in this Surah Al-Baqarah, whenever he said, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu innama al-khamru wal-maysir wal-ansab wal-azlam rijsun min amal ash-shaytan. So alcohol, gambling, idols, those arrows they threw to make decisions about what they're going to do at the board, those are the filth of the work of Satan. So avoid it so that you could succeed. So some of the scholars of Islamic jurisprudence, they tried to use this verse to make alcohol an impure substance. What's interesting is none of them chose to describe the tools of gambling. So for example, some dice or whatever cards that they gamble with. No scholar ever said that those are impure. No scholar even said that the statues are impure. Once I was with a brother, we went to the Chinese restaurant, and I was joking with him about the Buddha statue there. He was like, Astaghfirullah, you just touched, the idol. And so I was like, I don't think it's an idol, and definitely I'm not touching it to worship it. I'm just, it's interesting that Buddha was supposedly this very spiritually pure being that was against the world, and yet he's this big fat guy. I was like, I'm trying to understand that. So alcohol, gambling, idols, and divining arrows are the filth of the world. Why? Because alcohol removes you away from spiritual thought. When you drink alcohol, it takes you away from a spiritual thought. It makes you selfish, and you become more about yourself and more about the desires of the body, right? Gambling, it takes you away from the blessing of divine sustenance, that we have been blessed with the wealth that we have. Our wealth is not ours. We're simply using what wealth he has given us, and we have to use it wisely and according to. So just randomly throwing wealth out there and losing it for no purpose of work or for investing in things of value is worldly desires. And then idols, obviously describing something on the earth as God, is absolute filth. And this thing where what I'm going to do and how I'm going to make my decisions in my life is about throwing an arrow at some moving thing. It doesn't make any sense. It is the filth of decision making. A Muslim should be wise and intellectual. So we should avoid all of that if we're going to succeed. Succeed how? As spiritual beings, as people living in a spiritual truth. So this is what we are called to. So the value of a clean soul. This is where we get to the core points here. Imam al-Asfahani, one of the great scholars, he said, whoever isn't pure in their soul will not be pure in word and deed, because a container can only pour out what it contains. This is one of the most beautiful statements that so many scholars and mentors have carried throughout the years. When you say and do things that are harsh and mean and filthy and foul and corrupt and sinful, it's because there's an impurity in here. And so it's going to come out. It's going to become the deeds and the words of what you bring into the world. So when you're busy with purifying the soul, then that brings goodness out of your life. So all the conflict and strife in society is because people have, to large extent, become heedless of what they actually are and for what purpose we were created. They look at themselves as like two separate things. Like, I'm a body and I have a soul. So maybe on Sunday I'll go to church and I'll be a soul. Maybe on Friday I'll go to Jummah and I'll be a soul now, right? And so, I'll worry about my soul in Ramadan. In Hajj I'll start being spiritual, inshallah. So when you see those two as interconnected and working together, this is very important towards our success as people. Emphasizing who and what we are and why we exist could never be understated. In terms of how we talk to our kids, how we think about ourselves in our daily interaction, this understanding who we are and what we're about and what we were created for is going to drive us to a purpose well-driven for which we were created. It's only when we truly understand these things we function as these deputies, these caliphs, spreading justice, wisdom, kindness, and compassion in the world. So in conclusion, being made of a mixture between soul and body is an indication of the need to care for both of these things. We should have an equal concern and care and a balance about how we care for our body and our soul, and that our soul is regulating how our body functions and the priorities it has. But we do not neglect one for the other, and then thus there is an imbalance. That's why in Surah Al-Baqarah here, I forgot to put, I guess maybe I wasn't able to put at the end, كَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا, that with this revelation, we have made you a balanced, moderate nation so that you can be a witness to mankind and a messenger, a witness for you. So the way we live our life should be about balance between all of our responsibilities, balance between family and work and, the spirituality of the Quran guides us in every sphere of our life. And so it's not like, okay, I'm going to go pray all day in the mosque and make dhikr all day and read Quran all day. If you're thinking that's spirituality, then you have forgotten all the other responsibilities that the Quran is telling you to take care of. So this is the relationship between purifying the soul and being God's caliph, is that the spiritual guides and regulates the physical. That's what that's all about. That's why he's talking about the human responsibility on this earth, is that we as physical beings, that our purity and our goodness comes from our being a soul living in this body. And so we will do good to the world, and the goodness of the world will come out of us living our spiritual truth as we learn it from Revelation. So in conclusion, distancing ourselves from purifying our souls is what will lead to this materialism. This is the worldly competition for gain at the cost of spiritual loss. And, I've seen it time and time again. And, this is the capitalism that in our country here, it's built on purely, and it functions in a way that pushes people into this worldly gain, competitive, me versus you, I'm going to win, I'm going to have more money and more stuff, and I look prettier or more buff or more strong. It's this very, very materialistic based reality. So that's our conclusion. I'd like to open it up now for anybody has any questions, inshallah. Please feel free to ask any questions if you have them, inshallah.
Imam, one question. So when the initial slides we talked about man was created from clay. So is that only for Adam, or all the humans are created?
So if we look at what the ayah is saying, is that all of us, the basic reality, and when we study the biology, it's like, when you get sick, like, okay, now you need to take some iron and some zinc or some copper. And so all these things that you find in the earth, we are made up of those things, and we need those things. The stuff that is in the foods, which comes from the earth. And where do you think the animals got what they got? The stuff they ate from the earth became them, and then we eat all that. You see what I'm saying? So we are all from the earth, and the dirt here is a metaphor for everything on the earth, and the human beings were made from that. Any other questions? Okay. Okay, well, I will just assume that we're good and we have covered this inshallah for today. Jazakumullah khairan. Everybody, please, I mean, if you follow the, oh, I guess Suleiman has the question here. He put it on the chat. Oh, never mind. We did the chat. Okay. What is the practical way to balance life? So what I've found is the more you read the Quran and the biography of the Prophet and the character of the Prophet and how he lived, the more you will see this. I mean, obviously the Prophet was very unique, but he was always surrounded by companions. And when you read about the companions' lives, you just see that people learn through trial and error. So, for example, Abu Darda, the famous story where Darda, she was upset and bothered, and so the brother Salman Farsi came to the house, and Abu Darda is not there. He's fasting and he's probably praying in the mosque, waiting for the next salah. And he's like, "Where's Abu Darda? Oh, that guy. He's always fasting every day, and he prays every night. He has no need for his wife." So this is here a spiritual discussion of caring for the needs of our brothers and sisters in Islam. She's telling Salman, who lives with them, that he just is too religious. So Salman figured that was wrong. So he went to Abu Darda and he told him, "You need to spend some time with your wife and stop, fasting all day and all." He's like, "What are you talking about?" Like, he had it in his mind, and so they learned. And so then he went to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ said, "Abu Darda is right." And then he says that your wife has a right over you, your body has a right over you, your neighbors have a right over you, your Lord has a right. Everything has rights over you. So just to function in life with a remembrance of God, but dealing with things and circumstances and situations is something that balances out. The more you don't, the more you don't look at yourself as, I have to be very religious and do lots of worship things like praying and fasting. So character is something that's supposed to come out of praying and fasting and all of that. And so that's where we increase in our value as people. So there's, you said that you have the pillars of Islam. So those are, built around them is the whole building of our faith, And so the walls and the carpet and the ceiling and all of that is there around those pillars. And so a lot of people just look at the pillars as the whole of Islam. Like, that's what's Islam all about. And so if I did that, then I've done my Islam and now I need to get to my normal life here. So everything in your life is related to spirituality, but even enjoyment. Like the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, they used to spend time hanging out and making jokes and reading poetry, and they would race and wrestle. And, so it wasn't like they were just, the way people picture it in their mind because of some guilt trip religious mentality that is formed. I mean, you find it in all the groups, by the way. You have the Orthodox Jews, the hardline Christians, they have this very narrow-minded, rigid, control, forceful attitude. So Samir has this question: how does the guidance and free will relate to predestination? So I don't use the term predestination or fate because they don't go along with what we read in the Quran. So God has absolute knowledge and nothing happens except for that he allowed it. So his omnipotent power and control over every atom in the universe is absolute. And his knowledge of things is absolute. But that doesn't mean he's causing people to be of a certain conviction of faith, and he is not causing people to live and act in a certain way. We are all living right now in time. See, God is the creator of time. You see, if you can just accept and come to terms with this fact without trying to figure it out, then you can see the point. He's not governed by time. Time is not something that he exists in this momentary learning things and going through stuff and experiencing and thus changing. God is not part of all of that. We are, right? That's our finite, flawed reality. And so God created everything. To him, it's a done deal. But as we're going right now, we're interacting with him. And if we choose to seek his guidance and follow it, or to pray to him and ask for his guidance and forgiveness and favors, then that will mean that his decree will be as such. If we choose not to, then that will mean his degree will be as such, right? So we chose, right? And he allowed us to choose, right? But at the end of the day, his knowledge and allowance. So at the end of the day, what we see as Muslims is that the person controls their intentions, right? At the end of the day, God may not want you to do such and such and will prevent you from it. And so that is, circumstances happen where you really wanted to do that. That's why the Prophet emphasized everyone will have the reward of what they intended. So your soul, its value is in the sincerity of its desire to do his will, or the filth and corruption of to rebel and go away and distance shaitan, to go away from and to be called away from him and to be content with that. So that's where our soul's reality is being guided. So yeah, God is not forcing anybody to do anything. It's just we want him to be in time. That's where the problem comes from. Any other questions? We're good? Okay. Jazakumullah khairan. May Allah bless everybody. Stay healthy, stay clean, stay safe. May Allah protect all of you from the COVID-19. The cases are rising. We're in the 900s now, probably. Just today, 4 or 5 people have died from COVID-19 here in Charlotte. Be very careful. Do not treat it like, oh, well, I'm just going with my family members or friends, and so we know we're all quarantined. Everybody's getting stuff in the mail. Everybody's going to the store. Those things are happening. You don't know if you're a carrier. A Wuhan medical journal came out a few days ago that said they believe that 4 in 5 people who have COVID-19 have almost no symptoms. They might not think it's just like a raspy throat from allergies. They might think it's just a small headache. They might feel like, when they walked a lot, it just became a little bit heavier to breathe, So you don't know if you're carrying it. So somebody that you're carrying it to may be the one that has the genetics or the situation where that could destroy them and kill them. And we see kids dying. We see, athletes and gym people and marathon runners dying. It's not just old people with weak immune systems or things. So let's be safe. Let's get over this thing. Inshallah, Friday, we'll have a sermon on before Dhuhr prayer, where we will all talk about, we'll communicate our plan, our general plan for Ramadan. We have a very special plan for Ramadan. It's going to be something very special. It's going to be a very beautiful, blessed experience. We are given a special opportunity right now, not we are imprisoned by a virus. Allah wants good for us. That's why he created us, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. May Allah have mercy on all of us. Inshallah, we'll see you tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.